The Ukrainian army has pushed its operations against Russia in southern and eastern Ukraine as long and as hard as it could. But as the snow falls and sub-zero temperatures set in, the last attacks of either side will fizzle out eventually. Both Kyiv and Moscow will use the winter lull in fighting to reflect on how they can better exploit their strengths and mitigate their weaknesses going forward into 2024. And the war is most likely expected to spill into 2024. For more on this, we are being joined by our guest, Ambassador Volker Stanzel, former German ambassador to China and Japan. Welcome to WION, sir.
Thank you.
Ambassador, let's start with this. Neither side is close to winning, but neither is close to losing either. For Russia, is holding on to its occupied Ukrainian territory equivalent to a win here, hoping that Kiev will eventually just get pushed towards a negotiation table by the West if Russia just holds on long enough?
Well, yes, you might see it the other way around as well. Kiev holding on to the territory that it reconquered, about half of the whole territory that Russia had conquered after invading Ukraine. Holding on to that is already a win because the attacker, the aggressor, Russia, wanted to conquer the whole of Ukraine. And in his speech yesterday, Putin has reaffirmed that. So just holding on to where the front line is now is already to be considered a win, even though we have been tempted to think Ukraine, after its reconquering so much territory, would continue on the path forward, which it did not manage to achieve.
That's definitely another perspective to it. It's about holding on, and even Ukraine holding on to its posts and holding on to its lines can also be seen as a win for Ukraine, considering what Russia essentially wanted to achieve with which they invaded Ukraine, the objectives with which they invaded. So the next point, Russia's defense spending has reached its highest levels in recent times. Where is Moscow getting the funds from? Are there external factors involved here?
No, not external factors. I think they get it from their own people. Russia's people are impoverished to a high degree compared to neighboring countries, even compared to China. And I think that is the path that Putin has in mind. He will need to get more, to mobilize more people, to get more troops, and he will need more money. And that can only come from the pockets of his people.
The amount that they have dedicated for defense spending. Now, one would have assumed that their economy would crumble given the kind of sanctions that were put in place. Do you feel the sanctions have had the desired effect, or do you feel they've fallen short from, limiting Russia's scope?
Well, on the one hand, they had an enormous effect, as you can see from the situation in Russia that I just alluded to. On the other hand, they have not achieved what the West hoped it would achieve. The war is not over. Putin also accepts that there is a stalemate along the front lines, and he's getting ready for a long-term war.
Ambassador Stanzel,
yes, they've not achieved everything they wanted.
Ambassador Stanzel, also wanted to understand from you now the kind of partnerships that Russia has developed or strengthened, I would say, with North Korea and China, and the imprint that Russia has had in Africa, essentially, especially since the Russia-Ukraine war started. Do you feel that has helped Russia stay on its toes, stay on its feet?
Well, I think the achievements in Africa don't go that far. It's mainly something that helps Russia's image in Africa, but that does not support Russia's war. It's a closer alliance with China is another matter. That is a matter of concern. And you mentioned North Korea. The same is true there, but you did not mention Iran. And Iran and Russia have developed a close cooperation in military matters. Drones from Iran being exported to Russia, Su fighters being exported from Russia to Iran. So that is a matter of concern, I think, in the long term, even if you look at something like the Middle East.
Ambassador, now coming back to the Russia-Ukraine war, again, there are no signs of it settling down. There are no signs of it not entering 2024. I wanted to ask you, now the winters have arrived, the mud season has arrived. How much do you feel this will impact Ukraine's ongoing resistance?
I think the winter itself does not play that much of a role because Both Russians and Ukrainians are used to hard winters, and the war has already gone through one winter. But the stalemate situation is something that will certainly impact considerations both in Moscow and in Kyiv and in the countries that support Ukraine, like my own, whether the strategy pursued so far is the right one.
Ambassador Stanzel, also wanted to take your perspective on this. Now, for America, for the US, the Ukrainian Security Assistance Initiative, the USAI, has almost run out of funds, or has run out of funds, because that is what they were saying. They were about to run out of funds. That was somewhere in the beginning of October. Now, the last few presidential drawdowns have come down to 350 million and 225 million in October and November, respectively. If you compare those two figures to the earlier months, these have been very low comparatively, which has been the lowest drawdown since the war started in 2022. Would US be willing to get out of the war in West Asia so it may again direct resources and efforts towards Ukraine?
That is an interesting perspective, and I think that might well happen, depending on how the situation in the Middle East evolves. But the basic problem is, of course, one of the domestic policies in the United States. Even if the president succeeds in getting through his presently prepared package of support for Ukraine, even if he succeeds there, we don't know the next step. Will the Republicans join him another time with another effort? This is an open question, and I think this is something that you speak to a German diplomat, after all, that concerns us Europeans very much, because with our efforts, we can never match the American ones, but we might have to increase our own efforts in supporting Ukraine.
So one last question. Now, I know Germany has been a major supporter of Ukraine in terms of their requirements with the ongoing resistance against a Russian invasion. I also wanted to understand, how far is the European Union at large, together, how far is the EU willing to go to support Ukraine in its ongoing resistance against Russia? There was news that 1 million artillery shells is something that they will not be able to provide within the timeline. They may take longer to provide it. But do you feel going forward the EU will be providing some kind of, or would be facing some kind of a compromise in terms of their support to Ukraine?
It will be a compromise, yes. It will not be on the level that we have achieved in the past. We're just not able to do that. But as you could see from the discussions at the NATO Foreign Ministerial yesterday and the day before, there still is unity in the EU in the general terms. We need to support Ukraine.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining in right here on WION World is One, sir. That was Ambassador Volker Stanzel, former German ambassador to China and Japan, joining us here with his insights on this. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you.